market in Australia has increased over 530%, which is huge. If we look at it and we peel it back for an investment, to get into the market and be a property investor in 1990, it was 2.8 times your wage to buy an investment property and hold it. Money used to be backed to the gold standard. So before 1971, the banks had to have a certain amount of gold in their banks, or in their vaults I should say, to lend out money.
We believe every Australian deserves a right to own at the very least 5 investment properties. I'm Adrian Trimboli.
And I'm Frank Ambezi, and welcome to the Invest in You podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, today, the golden era, okay? We're going to talk about when was the golden era of investing in property. Was it in the 1990s when you could get a property that was under $100,000 in Melbourne and Sydney, and you could hold on to that property to today? Maybe those properties might be worth 2 million plus. Or was the golden era today, 2024? Inflation's probably at an all-time high. At one point it was in the last few years, but interest rates were at a record low, and we're seeing a big shift in the market, but we're seeing prices go through the roof as well. So is today the golden era, or was it in the back? Did we miss the golden era and it's harder for Australian and property investors to get ahead today? I don't know, but if you stay till the end, I will shed some light on this, and I guarantee you will learn something new, something different. This podcast here right now and today that I'm actually recording is to give you clarity, but to shed some light on something as well and give you hope, more importantly. So stay to the very end, and I'm going to show you or explain to you what is going on in today's market. The golden era of property investing. What are we talking about today? Today is something to have an eye opener on where today's property market is in Australia. We're going to talk about the past, but I think what the interesting part here is that I really want to, really focus on is, if we go back in time, okay, we go all the way back to 1990 when interest rates are at a record high at 17% here in Australia. Property investing, probably wasn't as common as what it was today, okay? And so things have changed a lot since then. And I want to really, really shed some light on something like this, because I can't help it enough. I see so many people sitting on the fence. Not doing anything. And you might be one of those people, just sitting on the fence, scared, not doing nothing because, you think property is unaffordable. You're looking in your own backyard, and guess what? You're looking at prices at $1 million or 2 million or even 3 million or more for a property. And so this is to give some clarity about where the property market is today and compare it back in the day when our parents, for example, when I go back all the way when my mum purchased her property, and the baby boomers, and how they were going, how they were coming up the ranks and they were buying property, how it was very difficult. They reckon it was very hard. 17% interest rates, wages were literally 1/3 of what they are today, compared to today's average wage, and so it was very difficult for them, they say. Okay, but I want to really focus on the emphasis here for today's podcast is that it's not hard to become a property investor. It is not hard to become a property investor. I'm literally, I want to scream into this camera if you're listening to this, because people think it's hard today. They think they're complaining and they're saying, property prices aren't affordable. Yeah, in certain areas, of course. If you look in Melbourne and Sydney, it can be quite unaffordable for the average person on the average wage. Okay, but maybe the Australian dream of buying the family home is sometimes not the best thing to do at the very beginning of your journey when you're trying to get into the market. Okay, we're being sold to this lie that you should buy the family home. It's the dream to buy the family home. At the very beginning, it might not be the best choice for you and your family, especially these days with inflation so high, the cost of living being very expensive. You live in a capital city, it's unaffordable to buy a house, and so you're going to have to go into an apartment or unit, and guess what? That property there is probably not going to grow and do anything for you. Then you want to sell it, go and buy a family home, and guess what? You've got no equity, you've made no money on that property, and guess what? You're back to square one. Okay, where you could have done something a little bit different. Now, I don't want to talk about what you could have done. I will relate, and I will give some, I will shed some light and my thoughts of what I've done. I'll explain what I've done and how it's worked for me and how it may work for some other people. And you might, get some clarity from, what I do. But today I want to really go back to 1990, how property was very unaffordable apparently for the baby boomers because interest rates were at 17%. In the last 34 years from 1990 to today, the property market in Australia has increased over 530%, which is huge. Okay. Now, back then, when in the 1990s, interest rates were at 17%, okay, even 18% for some lenders, the average wage in Australia was about $27,000. Okay. We compare it to today. Interest rates are at 6%, okay, but the average wage in Australia is around $89,000 per annum. Okay. So things have kind of changed. So if we look at interest rates versus income just only, and don't worry about property prices, it really looks more affordable for today for us as investors. But of course, Frank, you're going to tell me, property prices back then were, probably 1/10 of what they are today for some markets, or 1/20th of what they are for some markets, and that's probably correct. Yeah. So let's have a look at the stats here, okay, which is pretty interesting. Okay, so in 1990, okay, the average wage was $27,000. The average price was $117,000 for a property in Australia. Interest rates were at 17%, and the population was at 17 million people. So let's hold that thought there, right there. Okay, take all that in. $27,000 average wage, $117,000 average property price, 17% interest rates, 17 million people in Australia. 84,000 people. 84,000 is the average wage in Australia. Okay, the average property price is $966,000. Interest rates at 6%, and there's 26 plus million people. Okay, so let's have a look at this. Look at that. Let's look at the average wage and how many times the average wage is the average property in a capital city back in 1990. Okay, it was 4.3%. 4.3% someone's wage in 1990 to buy an average home, average property price in the capital cities in Australia. Let's go to 2024. It is 10.8 times your wage to purchase a property in the capital cities in today's market. 10 times your wage, nearly 11 times your wage, okay, which is huge. So when we really, really look at that, things have changed dramatically, okay, since then. And so, when I hear the baby boomers say, it was tough in my time to buy a property, it was hard. Interest rates were at 17%. I was making $20,000 or maybe $15,000 or $30,000, whatever it was, depending on the individual. I really challenge it and I go, no, it wasn't. It was probably easier for you. It probably was easier for you. If you just look at the concepts of capital cities versus, then and now, there's a big difference, very big difference. Okay, but let's just have a look at this. Let's just peel this back as well even more, because I want to just go into the finer detail. The average property price, okay, for the average property price back in 1990, it was nearly $17,000 a year in principal and interest repayments at 17%. Okay, $16,000. Where today, you look at it at 6%, okay, average property price is about nearly $62,000 on the principal and interest. Okay, so things, of course, it's quite changed. Of course, if we look at it, it's nearly, an entire wage. It's about 10 grand short in 1990. So if you're earning $27,000 per annum, and let's say the property's costing you $17,000 per annum, you got $10,000 to live off, basically. Okay, back then, so it was very difficult if you really think about it back then. If you look at it today and you buy an average price property in today's market around the $966,000 in 2024. It's $61,000 or $62,000 for principal and interest repayments on a property like that. So if you're earning 80 or 90 grand, okay, you got 30 grand to live, which once again, you might say, Frank, that's not enough to survive. And I totally agree. It's not to have a lifestyle where you want to, go on holidays and things like that. You're going to kind of struggle. And that's fair enough. But let's just have a look at, today as well, and have a look at other things as well, and we can peel it back. So if you were to rent a property back then in 1990, average rent was about $140 per week. Okay, so if you rented it out, the repayments would be $9,500 per annum on principal and interest as an investment. Okay, which isn't too bad then when you look at if you're earning $27,000 per annum. Today, if you rent out that property, average rent in Australia is around $627 per week. Okay, combined capital cities. That's $28,000 in repayments. So once again, now you've peeled it back, and now it starts to look like it's affordable. Okay, and when you really look at the numbers, it probably is more affordable, because if you've got a property that's costing you $28,000, okay, we're not factoring other expenses like mortgages, and if you've got your own family home and this is classified as an investment, yes, it might be quite tough for some people, but it's doable. So if we look at it and we peel it back for an investment, okay, to get into the market and be a property investor in 1990, it was 2.8 times your wage to buy an investment property and hold it, okay? And that's for the first year. As that keeps going, it's going to come down, of course, as you pay down the property. 2024, you know what the difference is? 3 times your wage to own and hold an investment property. So really, 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 really is the golden era when the baby boomers were buying property, when we really think about it as the millennials and the Gen Zs and Ys and all the other, I get lost with all the gens and all these things that they talk about these days. But it's a really unaffordable when we really think about it. Okay, because if it was 2.8 times your wage to hold an investment property back then, and today it's 3 times your wage to hold an investment property today, it's not much of a difference. Okay, so to own a family home can be quite different. Okay, and so where I like to shed some light on this is, going into purchasing your first family home can hold you back for a number of years. Okay. For example, the reason why I rent vest is because for a number of reasons. I get to live in a home that cost me, this home just got sold in November 2023 for $2 million. Okay. I pay 45 grand a year in rent. If I had to own this property with a 6.5% interest rate, principal and interest, okay, and I put a 20% deposit, it's going to cost me $120,000 a year to hold this property, okay? Which I look at as pretty crazy. But I can put all that other money into other properties, investment properties, and build up my portfolio. And when the time is right, I want to execute, and then I can use some of those properties by selling them to go pay off the new family home that I decide to get. And that's one strategy that someone could use. Or, you could keep building your property portfolio and just keep renting for the rest of your life. That's another strategy a lot of people do use. I like that strategy a lot because you're not putting yourself locked into a mortgage. And if you want to get up and go and do something, you can, and move to another area, move to somewhere else that you might want to give it a shot. That's another opportunity as well. So when we look at that, there's some opportunities you can do like that. Or you can just go straight into your family home if you can afford it right away and get it all sorted. And then, you've locked it in and, it's affordable for you at that point in time. Or maybe it might be something that, you can't. And so it's where you're going to, you have to compromise on your lifestyle. But that's something that you have to take on as an investor or as a PPR owner and take that sacrifice on. And that's something you have to think about. Okay. But let's get back to the topic. Okay. Let's get back to everything. So, as we know, it can be very unaffordable in the inner hubs of Melbourne, Sydney. If we look at, Bondi, the median house price is, 3 million plus, and it can be very unaffordable for people, to buy a family home there. So if we look at it, it's, in a lot of the capital cities, especially Melbourne and Sydney, in the inner ring, east and west, and depending on and north, depending on where you are, if it's Melbourne or Sydney, you're looking at 2 to 3 or maybe even more for for a freestanding house that you're probably wanting to live in, that might be your dream home. So let's just use Bondi for example. Bondi, okay, it's over $3 million of the median house price. I think it's 3.8 million. Okay, it is 42 times the average wage. 42 times the average wage in Australia, which is ridiculous. And when I hear these numbers, I just go, Jesus Christ. People lock themselves into some of these properties, and it's pretty crazy that you got that there. I really look at it now. Not many people are going to go out there and do something like that, of course, because they probably can't get the borrowing to buy, a $4 million property nearly at an average wage in Australia. But they will go and they'll lend up to their gills. And sometimes, if you start to look at it, a property is going to be 15 or 20 times your wage, or if not more than that. That is something that you're going to be a slave to the property, which is pretty scary. Okay, it's very scary. But where I want to give you guys some hope, okay, is, okay, on the horizon, we are living in the golden era. We are living in the golden era of property investing, I do believe. That's my true, honest opinion. And the reason why I say that is because there's over 15,000 suburbs in Australia, okay? And there is so many markets that will outperform other capital cities. And so for someone that wants to get ahead, get into the property market, start investing, okay, and say, you know what, let's put the family home on hold for now and let's buy some investment properties, and then we can use those investment properties to purchase our dream home and make it more affordable for us while we can still, get ahead in life. There's markets that you can purchase a property under $500,000 still that have grown, and some of these markets have grown in the last 4 years, have grown over 100%, some of these markets, okay? I want to talk about places like Townsville, Toowoomba, Bundaberg, Bunbury, Playford, Ipswich, Dubbo, Wagga. These places have performed tremendously well, okay, over the last 4 years. And so it's affordable for people to get into those markets. And if you got in at the right time, some of these properties you could have purchased for $300,000. And today, some of those properties might be worth $500,000, $600,000, or $700,000. Okay. And it's pretty crazy to see that, if you open your lenses and look beyond your backyard, you can do some pretty powerful things. And just imagine you bought 3 or 4 properties at $400,000 or $500,000, let's say. Okay, you bought 3 properties. Okay, around let's say $400,000. Okay, on the average wage at $89,000, you'll be able to service those 3 properties. You'll be able to then use those properties down the track when they've grown, and probably, let's say, 10, 20 years down the track, they're worth $1 million each. You've got $3 million worth of assets. And that's just sitting there buying a few properties and just sitting and holding and not doing anything else. I see it all the time. I've seen clients do it a lot, and it's helped them, build a property portfolio. And I can use examples, but I don't want to. Today is just to give you clarity about what you can do. So when we really look at it, when I really look, and I want to break this down, I want to peel this back. I want to look at, let's look at Townsville. Townsville, let's say the median house price is about $500,000, okay, roughly. If you look at, you can still get a property for $500,000, if not cheaper, lower than that, probably $450,000. But let's use $500,000 for example. The average wage in Australia is $89,000. That's 5.6 times your wage. Very affordable. 5.6 times your wage. You rent that property out for $450 per week, okay, give or take. Okay, that property's going to cost you in repayments per annum. After all, your rent will have a shortfall of $5,100 per annum. So that's going to cost you $5,100 per annum. Can you afford that? And that's when I really look at that. Like, can you afford that? And it's really, really affordable for a lot of the millennials, Gen Zs, Gen Zs, and so out there today to build a property portfolio where you can get ahead and where you can buy a property that's actually affordable. And then that property grows in values and you can do something with it. There's a reason why things have happened like this today. Okay. And for some people that are listening may know about this and may not know about this, but money used to be backed to something. Money used to be backed to the gold standard. So before 1971, the banks had to have a certain amount of gold in their banks, or in their vaults, I should say, to lend out money, and it had to be backed to something, which was gold. 1971, President Nixon in America removed the gold standard from money. And that's when money turned into fiat currency, what it is labeled today, which means it's not backed to anything, and banks don't have to keep a certain amount of reserves in their bank to lend out to the consumers. So this is when money turned into debt. Listen to that again. That's when money turned into debt, because money, to create money, you create money. And money is debt. So the more money you create, it's because someone's taking out a loan and then they're buying a property with that. That is a golden nugget right there to listen to that. Money is debt today. It's debt. That's how money is created. When the banks need more money, they create more debt. When the governments need more money, they create more debt. What happens? It loses value, where before it was backed by gold. If we look at gold prices today compared to 30, 40, 50, 100 years ago, they're gone through the roof. Why? Gold is physical, it's tangible, but it has value to it. Fiat currency today doesn't. And that's why we have a thing called inflation that's gone through the roof. Okay, and this has all happened, it's like death by 1,000 cuts. Okay, and that's why we look at property prices have gone ballistic, especially in your inner ring, Melbourne and Sydney, unaffordable for a lot of Australians, we say. Okay, but if you broaden your horizon, you can get ahead. So this video today, this podcast today, you are listening to this podcast. The reason why you're listening to this, you want to get ahead. And if you want to get ahead, you have to understand what you're doing, but you have to look at other markets around Australia. I can't help it enough to, I'm so passionate about this because I want to help people look around Australia, get ahead. Don't be a slave and put all your eggs in one basket and say, I want to live the Australian dream, just buy a family home if it doesn't make sense financially, or if you can't afford it and you go out there and you buy an apartment or a unit and it doesn't make sense. And guess what? You own the property for 10 years and you sell it for the same price, if not lower. And I see it all the time. It's happened to a lot of people. It's even happened to me. And so what I'm trying to say is think a little bit differently. How can you get ahead? If you buy a couple of investment properties and say that's my pure focus is to buy a family home. Okay, maybe let's buy 2-3 investment properties, sell them in 10 years' time. We've got all this cash that we've made, all this equity we've saved up in the same years of just accumulating our cash and saving, putting in some budgets. Then you can put a healthy deposit on property prices. But then you might come back and go, Frank, but property prices might grow by then in those areas. Yeah, they probably will. But guess what? If you buy correctly in the right era, in the right time, some of these markets are going to outperform Melbourne and Sydney, which we are seeing today. And so when I really look at the map in the last 4 years, from 2020 to 2024, Melbourne has grown 15%. Sydney's grown 31%. But if you look at some other places, like I said, we look at Bundaberg, 106% in those 4 years. If we look at Busselton, 71%. Victor Harbour, 65%. Where are these places? Mount Gambier, 73%. So some of these places have grown tremendously well, okay? And they've outperformed Melbourne and Sydney's market. And some of these medium house prices might be a lot more affordable now, or back then, even now, compared to Melbourne and Sydney, which is, of course, you're correct. But what you can do is scale your portfolio and build a pretty significant property portfolio during those times. While Melbourne and Sydney aren't doing too well and not performing too well, you can perform and get higher capital growth in some of these other markets. And when the timing is right, you can then look at saying, okay, let's sell off some of these properties and get into our family home. Or you can say, you know what, let's just keep doing what we're doing in rent vesting. Rent vesting gets us where we can live where we want to live. It's very affordable. I can pay 45 grand a year, like myself, like Frankie is right now, in a beautiful home in a beautiful area, instead of paying $120,000 a year in repayments. And I can, I can keep investing in properties and building more wealth. And eventually those assets, they will turn into cash flow positive assets, and you'll be making an income while you're sleeping. And that's kind of my goal of what I'm trying to do. And my goal is not going to resonate with you. So I'm not telling you what to do. I'm giving you things that I'm doing, okay? And that's what works for me, and some other different options that potentially could work for you. But when people say property is unaffordable, the golden era was in the 1990s. Property prices were very affordable. If you really peel it back and look at, if you really look back what it is today compared to those times, it's a very different time, okay? But if we look at the average wage and we times it by the average price or the median house price in these markets, it's literally nearly the same compared to what it was in 1990 compared to 2024 if you buy in the right market, okay? So if you got value from this podcast, please share this podcast, because there's going to be people out there sitting on the fence, not wanting to do anything. And it's very affordable. If you look at some of these markets, like I mentioned before, there's a lot of markets you can buy property under, $500,000. Property may cost you $5,000 a year to hold, but some of these property, are growing. Some of these markets are growing anywhere from 10 to 30% year on year. Okay, and you can get some good growth and strong rental growth and put yourself in a better position. But don't sit there doing nothing. If you're a property investor and you're scared, educate yourself, learn, and then make the decision. But it's not unaffordable if you really open your horizon and look out of your own backyard and look in other areas around Australia. And hopefully you got value from this podcast. And like I said, if you know someone out there that is wanting to try and get into the market, share this with them, because this video here is just going to give them a bit of a perspective to, is property really affordable? And it is. It really is in Australia, okay? There is markets that aren't, and I will admit that. There's markets that aren't, but you have to really, really peel back down and look in other areas. And maybe you may have to get someone. Maybe you can do it yourself, and you can learn and educate yourself, okay? Or get a mentor, or get someone that's done it before that it's a friend, and you can get some help off them. But, don't sit there doing anything, because the longer you wait, property prices go up, of course, and not just that, the timeline gets shorter and shorter. So this video is to help, to inspire, and show you or tell you what I've kind of done, and maybe that resonates with you. But if not, maybe another strategy will, okay? So we'll see you in the next podcast, and thank you for listening.